Hello and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod. Alan Quinlan and Matt Williams for the last rendition heading into the final weekend of matches. France is to lose, Alan, but from an Irish perspective, we'll touch on it first. Disappointing last weekend against the juggernaut on the day, which was France, and we've seen the Irish team just announced ahead of Italy and Rome on Saturday afternoon, which is the first match. Let's go through it. Obviously, the big talking point is Jack Crowley at 10, Jack Conan at 6, Furlong on the bench. And then in the second row, we see Joe McCarthy also drop to the bench and James Ryan come in there as well with Tadhg Beirne. What do you make of it? A team you expected going into the final round, or do you expect a few different variations, or is that right? Or do you think Simon Easterby is sort of on the same term as you would be on going into this one?
Yeah, I always expected a few changes. I think obviously Mac Hansen, James Lowe, both were big losses, you'd have to say, against France, given there was a lot of activity on either wing, both Penno
and that's right. I didn't even get to the back line, but thanks for picking that up.
BL Barry, they were so significant and had big impacts for France. So, Gary Ringrose been back available as well. I think, there was always going to be a bit of freshening up with this team. Jack Conan gets a start. He's had a really good Six Nations. He's scored tries for Ireland, had a real impact. It would have been great to have Furlong back available earlier in the tournament. But I suppose James Ryan comes back in. So I think it's a strange one for Ireland because you have to pick yourself up after such a disappointing loss. There was so much on the line really last week. They find themselves in third in the championship, and potentially, of course, a lot of stuff. 2 results have to go their way if they were to win it. But from being in control of their own destiny, it's now under control of others. So it's very disappointing. So when you're in that situation, it's obviously with the injuries, as I said, the 2 wingers coming back in, you're always going to freshen things up a little bit. The big talking points will be at 10, really, with Jack Crowley getting a start and Sam Prendergast moving to the bench. They invested a lot. It was a big call what happened in November with Sam Prendergast and Jack Crowley. I spoke at the time about possibly it been risky, not down to talent or ability, but just it was a lot for Sam Prendergast to take on very, very quickly. And the potential of maybe setting Jack Crowley back a little bit mentally. Crowley actually came out of it after November and reacted and had some really good games for Munster, which was very pleasing. And Matt will know this from a coach. I know it as a player as well. It's disappointing to be dropped, and it's a measure of people when they come back. And I think any coach who makes those decisions, you're conscious. Some are ruthless. Some don't even tell players or explain to them. They just announce the team and you're gone. Or we've heard lots of that over the years. But I think the handling of this situation was risky. Has Sam Prendergast done really well? Absolutely, and he's a wonderful player. I thought Crowley should have started against France. Not down to anything that Sam Prendergast had done wrong. I think there was a little concern over his physicality and his ability to be coming up against really the big boys in France and the physicality and pressure that they could put on him. He did some really good things in the game. He made some mistakes. But I thought Crowley was the one, and I said it beforehand that Crowley, for me, possibly should have started against France, solely just to give them that little bit of he's more physical, and that's the reality of it. And but it's a big call. He goes to Rome now, and there's actually a bit of pressure on Jack Crowley now, because if Jack Crowley goes to Rome and he doesn't play well and Ireland's attack doesn't function well, people will say, well, there'll be a bit of pressure on him. I thought the reaction to Sam Prendergast last week and some of it, the online stuff is an overreaction. I think it wasn't Sam Prendergast's fault that Ireland lost against France. I think most of the Irish players were off colour, and France were outstanding in that 25 30-minute period in that second half. So, so the team is freshened up essentially. And, when you look at a team like this, I know we always talk about depth and the future and 2027. It's a very strong Irish team going to Italy. And they'll need to be on song. They'll need to play well. And as I said, there's pressure on them now because Italy will fancy, shaking them up a little bit, and they'll really target Ireland.
Matt, we'll get into the fly half debate shortly, but overall, Ireland in that second half were leading when they scored that try with Dan Sheehan early on, and then that sort of 20-minute period, they capitulated, and France just upped the gears. Too much power, probably throughout the game in that second half, and also the backs, Bale Beret, as Alan mentioned, were too good. How do you think they'll react, and what do you think this couple of days has been like for them? Because this was the one they wanted to go for 3 in a row. Yes, they can still do it, but it's out of their hands. It's probably not going to happen. So what do you think the last 72 hours has been like for Easterby trying to rally the troops? Or is it not as hard as I'm making it out?
No, I think it will be, Stuart. Great wins or great losses. You have to, whether you're high or low, you have to get up back to that level of performance. Sometimes teams, when they win a great game, the next week they don't play well because they haven't dropped back down. And the same thing with teams that get a heavy defeat and all of a sudden a prize is taken away from them. So they had a grand slam. When they ran onto the field last week, they had the grand slam in their grasp. And not only they lost the grand slam, they could come third in the championship. So that reality, when it hits players, is hard. So it used to be all week would be just trying to get his team back up to that pitch of being able to play. And I think bringing these fresh players back in who have been out for various reasons, Gary Ringrose for suspension, the 2 wingers injured, Furlong, Joe McCarthy being put back on the bench, is a definite message, because Joe did a very dumb thing in that game that cost them the sin bin. And when the sin bins were on, that cost them the game. The last bit of that would be Ireland saying the 2 different parts of the first half and the second half. In the first 20 minutes, why didn't we score those points? Because Ireland are renowned for scoring early. I said to Rob Carney there, we only had a few seconds at the end of that match when we were in studio. I said, when can you remember the last time Ireland didn't score in the first 20 minutes? And we didn't have the stats out, but I certainly, if you think of all the great wins Ireland have had, they always score early. They had all the running of that game, the first 20, but had nothing on the scoreboard. If you don't put scoreboard pressure on your opposition, especially the big teams, France, New Zealand, and South Africa, and to another extent, England, it's very hard. That scoreboard pressure is everything. They didn't do it. And then the second part is what happened after Sheehan's try. Because Ireland did not, and this is the Irish team's words, and they're good words. They want to impose their game plan on the opposition, and they just didn't. And France were vulnerable. They had Gizou playing in the centres. They had a 7 playing in the centres. And everyone's saying, he's a hybrid. I mean, that's just crap. The guy had a 3-on-1 and kicked the ball away. They should have scored another try. And his own try was a pick and go, because France, what everyone's missing, France played 9 forwards in that period. Ireland didn't get a chance to expose him defensively because they just didn't have any ball. They were completely dominated by 9 French forwards. So again, that won't happen against Italy. They don't have the power, the size, or the resources on their bench. But they're the questions. But what I think Easterby's got to get back is, in another way, I'm not contradicting myself, at a certain point during the week you say, we've got to forget about France now, let's focus on Italy. If Ireland come out and play the way they can play against Italy, they'll win it and win well. Italy are a good side, but we've seen they can capitulate as well. And I know we don't want to get, I think Jack's, look, everything Quinny said about the 10s is right. I just think young Prendergast, you've got 2 good young 10s. I don't want to talk either of them down. Mentally, Prendergast looked tired in that match. And he may have gone a game too far. Quinny, hindsight's always perfect, but I think Quinny said this before the game, and I think he's been proved right. I think Jack should have started that game. And I think Jack will go very well this week. He takes the ball to the line exceptionally well. He's a brave defender. But I don't think any of us should write off Prendergast, nor should we suggest that Jack is what he is. They're both going to get better, and we have to be patient. I do agree with Quinny that the criticism of the players has been very poor from certain sections of the rugby community, and picking on a young look. The forwards lost that game. Quinny knows this. If you're 9 and 10 are playing poorly, 9 times out of 10 it's because your pack has let them down. Luku comes onto that field and played quite magnificently. Why? Because he was having an armchair ride. His pack was fantastic.
Just on that, Matt, I think the armchair ride, that sometimes the term is used, but what it means is 65% of France's rucks were 0 to 3.3 seconds.
Yeah.
And that's where a 9 and a 10 and a 12 and backlines excel. When that ball is coming really quick to them, and you have that X factor, that footballing power, elusiveness, speed, like the 2 French wingers, when they're getting that quickly. And the flip side of that, it's hard to defend it as well, because it's hard to get a defensive line set. Every single team in the world wants quick ruck ball.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of Ireland's strength in the last number of years is their accuracy, their ability. And like in the first half, Ireland had 4 turnovers, I think, at the breakdown. Mm-hmm. Or maybe throughout the game. It was 4 turnovers. I think Caelan Doris had at least 2 or 3 of them. So, Ireland did well in that part of the game, but for some reason, it just went awry in the second half. And those breakdowns were so quick. Down to France's accuracy, ball presentation, little bit of power, body position, placing the ball, all that stuff was essential. And then Luku, he's not this star that we thought, obviously DuPont and Gibson Park we think are the 2 best 10-9s in the world. But Luku, who people were questioning, I even thought when DuPont went off, I said, we were together, we watched the game, and we all thought that's big trouble for France.
Yeah.
But the French forwards, those athletes, they stepped up, and that ruck. So that's a stat, that's a fact. 0 to 3 seconds, 65% of their breakdown. And
Quinny, if you look at the other side of that, and your points are absolutely rock solid and accurate. Jamison Gibson Park and Bundyaki had their quietest games for Ireland in a long, long time. Robbie Henshaw, doesn't mean they were poor, but they couldn't, again, impose themselves on the game in that second,
and
30 minutes.
There was a lot of reliance on trying to, Bundyaki or Robbie Henshaw or Hugo Keenan trying to take on French players in tight spaces and maybe step and get a little bit of a gain line or a little win. But there was no stress or pressure really on that French line. France actually defended really smart.
Brilliantly.
Early on, they were jamming off the line and they were manning up, double tackling. The Doris one, he's tackled over the line. There's two French forwards there tackling him. I think they were very shrewd and intelligent then to actually fan out across the field a lot when Ireland had a little bit of space and were trying to attack. And then, in turn, out in that 13 channel out to the wing, there wasn't a lot of space because the number of French players got across the field. So Ireland never really got to high multi-phase. Anytime I've ever played France or any French teams, it's all about hold on to the ball. They'll get tired. Someone will get sloppy. Now, I do think as well, there's an argument to say that they gave away a lot of penalties in that first half. And I thought Angus Gardner possibly could have went for a yellow at some point. They were cynical enough, deliberate, offsides at the breakdowns. They were kind of sloppy penalties that he could have. And that's the game really. Ireland just didn't capitalize. If they get those couple of tries early on, maybe they settle into a better type performance. But ultimately, we lacked a little bit of pace and we lacked a little bit of explosiveness. And France were excellent. Their strategy was really good, and they punished. And people, if you look back at the game, that 30 minutes in that second half, France weren't hammering Ireland into submission for long periods. It was just real explosive moments. And I think that little chip out from Ramos up along the Irish touchline, Ireland, they gather the ball up outside their 22. They're too high. They get counter-rucked brilliantly by France. And then there's carnage and be able to read. That's the try really that kind of summed up a good bit of sloppiness.
And Alan, in what you've described perfectly, we have to say this: Ireland were out. The tactics France used in both offense and defense were absolutely brilliant. Yeah, they got it right, and Ireland got caught. There's no doubt. Now there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, we've got a lot of injuries, guys out, but for sure.
Alan, we must go back to it because reports have broken over the last 5 days about Jack Crowley. Handré Pollard is leaving Leicester. They clearly have earmarked the Munster and Irish fly half that he's their man. Banding around of £600,000, and obviously his contract's up. Ireland, as you would suspect, want to keep him. I'm not sure financially what they can offer him. When this first broke, not that matters what I think, I was like, nah, not a chance. He's definitely staying in Ireland and Munster. And then when you take it back, it's probably, as you said to me before we went on air, gone on longer than you think. And there's something not quite right on why he hasn't signed. It hasn't quite happened for him over the autumn as Sam Prendergast has come in and has been good, but maybe against France, you said, you talked about for a while, Jack Crowley should have started. He didn't. And he's in this situation now where there's a big lucrative contract we think is on the table for him, but yet you want to have him in a green shirt playing for the next 10 years, all being well with Ireland. Where do you see this? And where do you think Jack Crowley's future will lie over the next couple of years?
I don't know. I think he needs to probably get reassurances of where he's at with the Irish setup. That'll be a tough blow for him. I just think.
And does that make his performance in Rome, without putting huge things on it, like if he goes really well, it's a sign-on job, and if he doesn't, is this now coming down to this 80 minutes? Surely it's not like that.
No, it's not. There's no way Ireland can kind of have a dismissive approach to this scenario. Jack Crowley and Sam Prendergast and are two outstanding players. They're still very young. I think Crowley's 25, isn't he? Sam Prendergast is 22, just 22. So look, I would be a little bit concerned that this has gone on this far, because I know for a fact from my own time, if you're in a national squad or a national list, it was different when I played. There wasn't there wasn't much difference. I think there was a list of Irish players that the RFU wanted to qualify, get signed up. The national coach and the national selectors would give this list and say, we want these guys signed up. It's a little bit different now, where there's certain Irish players are not on national contracts and stuff like that. But Jack Crowley, he wouldn't have been on a national contract. It would have been a provincial contract. The question is, was he going to step up to a national contract? Is that what his agent is looking for? He played all of last season as a starting 10 for Ireland up to November, the last Six Nations and the 2 tests in South Africa. So it's a precarious position. I'm a little bit concerned that it's gone on this far, because we're now in the middle of March. Normally, guys who are signing, or the RFU want them to sign, that's done by December. They usually get that announcement then the end of January, start of February, such and such is signed up, but that's done weeks in advance. To say that this one isn't done is a little bit concerning. I think what happened in November did have an effect on the whole approach, that, if Jack Crowley was even, in fact, to find himself out of the Irish 23, well, maybe he shoots off for 2 years, 3 years, makes some money and can possibly come back again. I think it had a dent in his whole psyche. As I said, he responded very well in some games for Munster, and wasn't having that armchair ride. Even in the game they lost over Northampton, I thought that he was outstanding in the Champions Cup. He played really well against Saracens and Limerick. So when that money comes on the table, and Leicester have probably seen an opportunity here that all these agents chat, and different agents, they feel things around. They talk to the French agents. Sometimes there's 2 agents involved. Matt will know this. You know, you have your Irish agent, and then there's a French agent who works with some of the clubs, and he scouts players for certain clubs. So they all talk, and obviously Leicester have known that Jack Crowley hasn't re-signed, so they put something on the table. That's what we believe. I don't think he needs to go to Italy and have an outstanding performance for the RFU to say, oh, well, we're basing this. That's not something that's happened. I'm sure they've made an offer. I'm sure David Humphreys will want to keep Jack Crowley, because it'd be a big story, wouldn't it, if Jack Crowley decided to leave? Hopefully it doesn't happen. Hopefully it doesn't happen.
What in your head, or if you're in Jack Crowley's situation, I think you've already spoke this week saying it would be a backward step. But if the offer, let's chuck out there, is 200 grand less to stay in Ireland and 200 more to go to Leicester, and you're not the number 110 at the moment, what his head must be absolutely fried, but probably in a good way, because if he was to leave Ireland, it'd be terrible for the country, as in a rugby perspective. But then, how do we work central contracts? Because other clubs, you know, everyone wants a 10. So if another club approaches another player, and the only way to keep them is put them on the central contract, surely that's not right either.
The IRFU have a history of never being held over a barrel. They will, you know, it's very, very hard to get the IRFU to threaten them with something and say, up the money or we're going.
And do you think this is the case? And one of the first ones?
Well, look, for sure. No, look, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way about Jack. I don't mean. What I'm saying is, Jack's got an option. He's got 600 G's of the Queen shilling to go to Leicester. we think, or stay here on significantly less money. Now, so let's just, you either go with the money or you don't. Now, but here's the reason. You know, I would say to Jack, you're 25, as Quinny says. You've got eight, maybe 9 more years in you. Think in the long term. If you stay and fight here and win, you will get the money. You will get your career prolonged, because the Irish system looks after its players, and you will improve. If you go to Leicester in the English Premiership, it's a substandard competition. Which clubs in the English competition are fighting in Europe at the top end? That's where Jack wants to be. He wants to be the top end of Europe. And he's not going to do that with Leicester. Will playing in the English Premiership make him a better player? No. So he's going to get some short-term financial gain, but is that in the long run going to be better for him? So, you know, I said, you know, I'm not talking out of school. Gordon Darcy, I had dinner with Gordon the other night. He faced the same dilemma when I was coaching him. He got an offer from London Irish for a lot of money and a lot less to stay here. And to Gordon's undying credit, he stayed and he fought. And look what he did with the rest of his career. He turned himself into one of the best inside centres Ireland's ever seen. And I think if Jack went, I would not criticise him, because it's a lot of money and you've got to look after yourself because your career's short. But I think it's a short-term gain for a long-term loss. And that's what not that Jack asked me, but that's what I would be advising him. But I also think the IRFU are remiss, because there is not a lot of quality 10s in the world. And there's certainly not a lot in Ireland. I have to say.
So why has he got to this position, Mark?
I'm not involved, mate. I certainly would say that Jack.
Why do you think?
I think Jack is not been selected. He has not got the money that international 10s are on huge money around the world. Mate, you know, let's not mix this up. If you are a high quality international 10, you go to France, you're on close to €1 million. You know, there's a lot of money for good 10s. And I think if the story's right and there's 200 Gs, Jack's been very, very underpaid. And he knows it. That's the market. We all know. If you're out there and you're in that position, you know the market for your position. So I don't understand why, if this report is true, why the IRFU haven't secured him with some form of bonus contract to reward him on the way through. So, you know, none of us are involved in the minutiae of this. But it is certainly has me on both sides astounded. So there's obviously what we're in the middle of is some negotiation via the media. And I agree with Quinny, though. Jack's a quality player. What he does in Italy isn't going to influence one or the other. However, if he had a great game, it wouldn't hurt his chances. I can tell you that much.
So it does, but it doesn't. Right.
It doesn't in the long run, but it won't hurt. You go out and play well and kick 9 out of 9, mate. You're not doing yourself any harm.
Okay, a last one on Ireland, Italy. We'll bring it back to that. Is the only way forward on Saturday, a bonus point win and 30, 40 points, plus the rest seen as a good day, and that's what we expect. And if it doesn't quite go to plan, should we be worried, or is that just the way rugby goes sometimes? Or would you say this whole Six Nation hasn't really clicked? Or are we just delving that into one defeat against France?
Yeah, Italy's going to be tricky. I think Ireland need to be ruthless in their approach. They need to have a real energy and determination, which will be the goal, of course. They've got to be accurate as well, because Italy have some really good players that can cause them problems. You know, and my experience of ever going to Italy, no matter what team they have, it's tricky. This team is very well coached by Quesada. I think what happened to them against France in the second half, they'll certainly, I'm not sure, you know, maybe the Springboks, maybe New Zealand could do something similar. I'm not sure if we can put 70 points on Italy. I think it's a very tall order. We're well capable of scoring lots of tries against them. But historically, this game has been tricky because they will fancy their chances against Ireland. They think they'll be powerful enough. They've got some very skillful players, and again, you know, they were in against England last Sunday. They did cause England some problems, and they look very, very dangerous at times in their attack. But from Ireland's point of view, if they want to get back on track and if they want to, you know, finish on a high, I think for them it'd be the real goal to try and get a performance here. Silence the doubters a little bit. I know there's a little bit of concern around the age profile, and that's a reality. And we could be in for a different sort of a future at the moment, as regards the transition heading towards the next World Cup and all that. But
Alan, something, sorry to butt in, something which has been a talking point this week is we've lacked pace. But you've said this for years. Ireland have never really had loads and loads of gas out in the wider channels or trick plays a long time. Sure, they haven't. So it's not. Yes, it's been brought up this week.
The ones that jump out for me: Dennis Hickey, Keith Earls is really quick. Andrew Conway was unbelievably quick. Tommy Bowe had a lot of gas. Who's there? You know, like Hansen and Lowe have done superb. They're brilliant footballers. They're intelligent. It's not just about catching the ball on the wing anymore and running past the opposition. It helps if you can do that when the opportunity arises. But most wingers nowadays come in off their wing. They're footballers. They're link players. Ireland's two wingers have done really well. But out and out gas is something that, you know, is you can't beat it. If you've got it, it really adds to your attack. It adds to, you don't just fling the ball out to your fastest guy, but you try and create opportunities for them to get the ball in their hands quickly. And then sometimes that out and out gas just it benefits your team massively. Tommy O'Brien, Jimmy O'Brien, they're two players that, you know, could have been involved last week. There's a few young guys coming through that played in the 20s in the last few years. So Robert Balakoon was the one a few years ago. I thought, you can't coach that. It's just, he's a sprinter, but you know, he's had a tricky kind of run and some injuries as well. So yeah, we've at times we've had really quick wingers, but the rest with the real depth can seem to produce them and select them more. So I think collectively Ireland have got to try and find that it's got to click a little bit for their attack. I don't think their attack has been as good as we've seen before. The approach is a little bit different. Ireland's had more possession against France, more territory. But again, France were the ones who had a dominant win. So yeah, hopefully the players coming in now will add something, a real energy and enthusiasm. And I do think scraping through against Italy here and getting a win and finishing third will be a big disappointment. I think if they can get a performance and a bonus point win, I wouldn't be going the 30, 40 points that you mentioned. I think if they win by 10 or 15 points and score 4 tries, it'll be a decent finish. But yeah, it's a tricky one. Rome is, Italy will be kind of rubbing their hands together saying this is a great opportunity for us.
Perfect. Closer than I think anyway. Matt, big one on Saturday night. France going for the championship against Scotland. We've seen their team. They've gone 7-1 again. Good return for Gael Fickou. Still only in his the right side of 30. Seems to be around since 1990. He's that good.
Yeah.
Fresh looks. Also, Legaric on the bench, and Luku starts at 9, obviously, with Dupont out injured, unfortunately for him. Let's hope we see him back in the pitch sooner rather than later, how good he is. But what about France, Matt? Like, is there any way? There probably is a small way Scotland can turn them over. Would it be so Scotland to do it or not this time?
It would be so Scotland to do it, wouldn't it? It would
and they've done it before.
Of course they have. They've won in Paris. And remember last year at Murrayfield, we all know Scotland won that game. That last try after full time wasn't awarded because the camera couldn't prove the ball was down on the try line. France knew they scored. Scotland knew they scored. The referee knew they scored. The TMO knew they scored. They just couldn't prove it. So, yes, Scotland are a real chance. Having said that, I think at the Stade de France, with a championship on the line, only their second championship under Galtier, the motivation for the French will be too good. They are a better side for having Fickou bat at 13. Barassi, for his qualities as a player, I think was suspect at 13. He was the position where I wanted Ireland to attack because he's made a couple of very poor reads across the Six Nations in defence. He let in a try. The winning try for England against France in the final second, he made a diabolical defensive decision in that one. And if people remember, beautiful Italian try off the scrum. He again made a very poor read and allowed the break on his inside shoulder. So I think having Gael Fickou there at 13, I like Fickou at 13. They often played him at 12, but I like him at 13. I think they'll be a better side for it. It's almost obviously you take out the great Dupont, same pack, same forwards, same bench. It's only your halfbacks that have changed, and Barassi is obviously out. I think he hasn't passed his HIA assessments after getting a belt last week. So that is a very good French side playing in front of a full house. It's going to be very vocal. Late Saturday night, quarter past 9 or 10 past, a quarter to 9 kickoff French time. I think as good as Scotland are, and they can be great at places, the motivation here to win a championship is massive. And interestingly, Dupont, who reports are it's an anterior cruciate, which is it's sad for us all because just to watch him play is a privilege. We're going to, we're not going to see him for the rest of this year and next year's November internationals. It's really sad because we missed a year of one of the greatest players the game's ever seen. We're robbed of seeing him, so it's sad. But being the man he is, he said, "No, I'm not going home. I'm not going to hospital. I'm going to stay with the team for the week, and I'll get it done later on." So he's in camp with the team now. And the motivation the guy provides and the leadership is extraordinary. Or Gregory Aldrich will take over the captaincy, but it's still a phenomenal French side. And let's just say this: it's the French fulfilling the potential we've known they've had. They haven't played to their potential for a whole championship ever. I mean, we saw that against England last week. They played to their potential, and if they play to their potential again this week, they'll win.
Alan, who'd be a rugby coach? Galtier 10 days ago, if they had lost against Ireland, finished third. Everyone's like, maybe out of a job. Now he's going to maybe lift a trophy a couple of weeks later. So the full circle moment for him. Could win a second championship. And now he's back in that hero cult status if they get it done. But yet, if it doesn't go their way, there's so many ifs and buts.
Yeah, I think it was... It's a tricky one because, what happened at the World Cup for them was catastrophic, really, on home soil. They haven't won enough of championships. They've been quite inconsistent at times. Mixed brilliance with some poor performances in the last couple of seasons. and very small margins. As I said many times, they could have been World Cup champions if few things went their way in that South African game in that quarterfinal. So yeah, there's pressure, and I think, but you must kind of tip your hat to Galtier as well, to Rafael Ibanez, who's behind the scenes.
Edwards.
He's kind of one of the ones that put all this together to get Sean Edwards. I know they're coaching. Some of the coaches have changed since the World Cup. But I think they've changed the mentality and the approach of French players as regards, he fought hard to kind of get the rest and recovery in between the Six Nations, before the Six Nations, in preparation with the French team. And as Matt will know, and living in France, that's a tricky thing with all the clubs there, to get the clubs to agree to rest players that they're paying their salaries. It's a different setup than here. So, of course, the disappointments are there, and there's expectation. And this is probably what we've seen from France in the last 2 years. If you look at the player profile and the type of players they have, the word golden generation has been mentioned. So, but they've underachieved. They've messed up a Grand Slam for themselves, really. They were very sloppy in against England, and credit to England on the day, but France should have won that game, and they'd be picking up a Grand Slam or going for a Grand Slam on Saturday night. So, yeah, they're a very powerful team. And Galtier, if he'd lost to Ireland last week and they'd kind of not been in the position they're in now to restore a chance of winning the competition, I think he could have been gone after this championship. But I think he's done a great job, because he's part of changing that mentality. And we spoke probably for 10 years about France being underachievers, been so inconsistent, been mentally poor, been sloppy in defence, blasé attitude at times, brilliance, world-class moments, and then laziness in defence, bad discipline, all that kind of stuff. The quality of players and the availability of the depth chart they have in France, structurally, it's getting this stuff right. And look at their 20s and last couple of years. They've incredible athletes, incredible players to select from. So France should be right up at the top of challenge for a World Cup, Six Nations every single year, and that's where the pressure comes from, really. So, they win, and if they mess up on Saturday night in Paris, France, the papers will go crazy there. They were some sections calling for his head a few weeks ago after the English loss. But I think, yeah, he does need to win the championship on Saturday night to stave off the critics.
Matt, I know you need to go. You've got 2 minutes. England, Wales in Cardiff. If France do slip up, it'd be a nightmare for them. But Steve Borthwick's England, who knows? They could nearly win a championship, or would win a championship if they beat Wales. They've mixed it up as well. Roebuck's on the wing, coming in. Marcus Smith back at 15. Another couple of changes. Do you find that all a bit funny?
Yeah, I got to say, I mean, they've had a different back three in every test. In other words, they haven't kept the same wingers and fullback as they're going through. It's pretty extraordinary. And to give England credit, I thought they attacked much better than they have. They certainly against Scotland, where they were appalling. They attacked very well against Italy. The Italians went straight back at them with some really good rugby. Up until half time, it was a very even contest, and they went away with it. And because they played pretty positive rugby, I think that the big unknown in this game is, well, let me finish on England. It's not a great England side. It's an average England side. They're competent, but they're not brilliant. They've got some injuries and so on. So they're not the greatest team in this tournament. It would be an injustice if they come through and win, but that's the competition structure. They can do it. They're winning their games the way they have won them. The French game was obviously the pivotal one for them, where they should have been beaten by 20, and France dropped the ball with the line open 4 times and let in a try in the last few seconds. But they won that game, so they're there where they are. What we don't know is what the Welsh are going to do. So there's been a lot of, we hate Gaddy, sack Gaddy, Gaddy's a problem. bring in a new coach. And we've had 2 courageous losses. There is nothing worse for an organisation than the excuse of courageous losses. That Welsh team still is not playing well enough to win Test matches. Now they're coming back to Cardiff, and we know they played much better at Cardiff than they do away. And against Ireland, they were quite quite competent for much of that game. Anscombe has made a huge difference. That team. Now, how will they perform at Cardiff? If they can perform better than they did at against Ireland, and better than they did in the first half up in Murrayfield, they were quite poor in the first half, but competent in the second half. Now the Scots dropped. That they will keep England in check. England may not get a bonus point there, and who knows? They might push them to the point of victory. Marcus Smith at fullback is a gamble because Marcus misses a lot of tackles at fullback. He actually made one last week, I noted, but he does one-on-one when a guy makes a break. Marcus is struggling to position himself to make the tackle. I'm not questioning the guy's bravery or courage. It's the technique of where you position yourself as a fullback to make the tackle. And we see Hugo Keenan make every tackle because and Hugo's not a big man. It's about where you position yourself. So that's an issue. The English forwards are strong, but that's through quarter line and what they do.
Tommy Freeman at 13 as well.
Yeah, it's a big question mark for me. Where I think when you put Anscombe in there and the way that's affected the Welsh three-quarter line with Thompson and Llewellyn there in the centres, I think that's been much more stable and done some good things. I actually think it's going to be a really good contest. I don't think England are huge favourites. That you've got to say when Wales are 16 in a row coming up for, you've got to say the English have got a bit about them. But it's going to be, I think it's going to be a really good contest.
And Matt, quickly, just 3 predictions. Alan, you've got to stay on the line, but Matt.
If I've got to do them now, I think Ireland will win and win with a bonus in the finals at Rome. France will win,
Okay.
and I think they'll get a bonus. And I think England will win, but not sure they'll get a bonus.
So Wales lose again. Matt, it's been a pleasure the last couple of months. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Love every minute.
Make sure you get that shoulder fit.
Old injury from a tackle. I got to go.
Too many shots.
See ya.
See
you, man.
Alan, just sort of sum it up in total. You think France will get it done? Would it be an injustice? Is that the right word if England were to lift the trophy come 10 o'clock on Saturday night or just after 10:30?
Would it be injustice?
Are we too harsh in England? Like they're now starting to turn those defeats into wins.
I think they're getting results, and I think they've November was very disappointing for them. They weren't a million miles away. I think they can really frustrate at times with their approach. When there's an opportunity to attack, I think it's back to sometimes they revert back to the box kicking and kicking a lot, but they're very talented players, I think, and they put themselves in a great position, I think, to get the result against France. It was an incredible match. Lots of mistakes, lots of errors in it, but it was an incredible win for them. And I thought they'd gain a lot from that, belief, confidence, all that kind of stuff. And then we saw them against Scotland. They were very, very poor, I thought. They have powerful players, and as I said, a lot of talent. But and they I think at times against Italy, they were very, very dominant as well, but vulnerable again on occasions. But it's a tricky one going to Cardiff. Wales obviously are on a 16-game unbeaten run or losing run, which is incredibly disappointing, and they're still in a tough place, even though there was a lot of positives out of the performance against Ireland. For 50 minutes against Scotland, they were bulldozed and were really poor.
We probably thought they'd give a bit more, didn't we?
I think a lot of people were thought that it would be a lot closer and that Wales would be a real match for Scotland, but it didn't materialise that way. I think the finish and the performance in the second half was much better. So we still don't know exactly where they're at, but you know, it's an incredible stadium. There's incredible history between those two sides as well, and I'm sure the Wales players. It looks like there'll be two changes. I think from what I'm hearing, Aaron Wainwright will possibly come in the back row for Tommy Raffel, and Joe Roberts will come in onto the wing for Tom Rogers. I think they're probably the two changes that Wales will make. So maybe that little bit of consistency again in selection will allow them to try and fix some of the issues and problems they had last week. They were very lateral at times, and I think there was probably a bit of expectation that they could cause Scotland problems by just holding on to the ball, but there was no real penetration or gain line success. So yeah, it's England's to lose really as regards the result. I think Wales will throw everything at them, but I don't think France are going to slip up in Paris. So
you normally like the Scots as well. You've got a soft spot for them.
Well, I think they've
doesn't mean they win, mind you.
No, I think their backline is exceptional, and as I said, there's
and Tom Jordan now he's
going to be in the lines. Yeah, and Jordan has done really well for him. But again, it's how the Scottish forwards deal with that French pack and that power, and the introduction of the players off the bench as well for France. So yeah, I think it'll be France, England, and Ireland. That's my predictions for the weekend.
You say it with a smile on your face. Al, thanks for the campaign, and don't forget we're in Cardiff on Saturday on Virgin Media, where Wales look to finally get that win against England, who do have an outside chance of winning the championship. Thanks very much, Al.
Cheers. Thanks, Stuart.